Ever get that feeling of, what's going to happen next?
Okay.
Like when you're waiting for test results or your boss calls you into a surprise meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Life is full of these ambiguous situations, right?
That's true.
Things could go great or not so great.
It's the not knowing that really gets to us, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that we don't all react to this ambiguity in the same way.
Yeah.
Some people naturally lean towards the positive,
Uh-huh.
while others tend to assume the worst.
Okay.
Psychologists even have a name for this.
Oh, they do.
Valence bias.
Valence bias.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Thanks.
So you're saying some of us are wired to be more optimistic in the face of uncertainty,
Yeah,
while others are, let's say, precautionary by default.
exactly.
Okay.
And it turns out this valence bias can have a real impact on our lives.
Okay.
Research suggests a negative valence bias. That tendency to jump to the negative
Yeah.
is linked to higher anxiety stress, even symptoms of depression. But a more positive bias seems to help with resilience and overall well-being.
Wow, that's kind of a big deal.
It is.
So if we tend towards negativity, are we just stuck with that?
Right.
Or can we actually shift our default setting?
Well, that's the exciting part. We're going to deep dive into a research study that explored exactly that, the possibility of changing our valence bias.
Okay.
And they found that we might be able to train ourselves to find the positive even when things are uncertain.
All right, sign me up for that training.
Uh-huh.
But first, how did they even figure this out?
The researchers used some clever techniques to understand how our brains react to ambiguity.
Okay.
They focused on surprised faces as their ambiguous stimuli.
Okay.
After all, a surprised face could mean good news or bad news.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
A surprise party is very different from a surprise audit.
Exactly.
Well,
So they showed people these surprised faces
uh-huh.
and tracked their reactions. And here's where it gets really interesting. They found that our brains seem to have a negativity bias as a first response. It's like we're wired to quickly flag ambiguity as a potential threat.
So it's like our brain is saying, whoa, something unexpected is happening.
Yeah,
Better be cautious.
that's a great way to put it. And they found evidence for this initial negativity in a couple of ways.
Okay.
First, they used this cool technology called mouse tracking,
Okay.
which basically follows your cursor as you make choices on a computer. They found that people's cursors initially gravitated towards negative response options when looking at surprised faces, even if they ended up rating the faces positive overall.
So even if we consciously decide something is positive, our initial instinct might be to see it as negative.
That's what the research suggests.
That's wild.
And they saw a similar pattern when they measured how long it took people to rate the surprised faces.
Okay.
Positive ratings took longer,
Uh-huh.
as if there was this extra step involved. Like the brain was going, wait, hold on, let's think about this a bit more.
Okay, so our brains might be jumping to conclusions.
Yeah.
But then what happens next? How do we get from that initial, to a more positive interpretation?
That's where things get really exciting because this research suggests we can actually use a cognitive strategy called reappraisal to shift our valence bias towards the positive.
Reappraisal? Is that like positive self-talk or something?
It's similar, but with a bit more nuance.
Okay.
Reappraisal is about actively changing your interpretation of a situation to change how you feel about it. It's not about denying the negative, but rather finding a different way to think about it.
So instead of just saying, oh, it'll be fine, you're actually looking for the potential positive aspects, even in a tricky situation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the researchers wanted to see if training people in reappraisal could actually change their valence bias towards those ambiguous surprised faces. So they designed a 2-session study.
Okay. A two-parter.
Yeah.
What happened in the first session?
In session 1, they had participants rate the positive or negative valence of different faces.
Okay.
Some were clearly positive, happy faces. Some were clearly negative, angry faces.
Yeah.
And then they had the ambiguous, surprised faces.
Okay.
This helped them establish each person's baseline valence bias.
Makes sense. So they had their control measurement before they introduced the reappraisal training.
Right.
Then a week later, everyone came back for round 2.
You got it.
Okay.
Now, in session 2, things got interesting.
Okay.
Before doing the face rating task again, they trained participants to use different emotion regulation techniques. One group learned reappraisal,
Yeah.
practicing how to change their interpretation of negative images to lessen the negativity, or even find positive aspects.
Interesting. So they're actively training people to find the silver linings.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, wouldn't any type of emotion regulation help? Like if you just calmed yourself down in general,
Uh-huh.
maybe you'd see those surprised faces in a better light.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
To test this, the researchers included other emotion regulation techniques.
Oh,
They
okay.
had groups that practiced suppression,
Uh-huh.
which is basically trying to hide your emotions,
Okay.
distraction,
Hmm.
where you focus on something neutral and unrelated,
Okay.
and distancing, where you try to view the images from a detached perspective.
Okay, so they had their reappraisal group and then these other groups to compare them.
Right.
What happened next?
After the training, all the groups did the valence bias task again, but this time with a new set of surprised faces.
Okay, the moment of truth. Did the reappraisal training actually make a difference?
The results were pretty amazing.
Okay.
The group that had trained in reappraisal showed a significant shift towards more positive evaluations of those surprised faces.
Wow.
And here's the key.
Okay.
Their responses to the clearly positive and negative faces,
Mm-hmm.
the happy and angry ones,
Yeah.
didn't change.
Wow, that's really compelling. So it wasn't just a general mood boost. Reappraisal specifically changed how they viewed ambiguity.
Yeah.
But what about those other groups?
Yeah.
Did any of the other techniques work?
Nope. None of the other emotion regulation strategies had a significant impact on the valence bias ratings.
That's fascinating.
Hmm.
I can see why suppression might backfire
Right.
if you're trying to bottle up your emotions.
Yeah.
Maybe that just makes the negativity stronger.
Uh-huh.
But what about distraction or distancing?
Mm.
Wouldn't those help you feel more neutral about the situation?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing about reappraisal.
Okay.
It's not just about changing how intensely you feel about something.
Uh-huh.
It's about changing the meaning you assign to it.
Okay.
Suppression, distraction, distancing.
Yeah.
Those might dial down the emotional volume,
Okay.
but they don't really change the underlying story you're telling yourself about what's going on.
Okay, I see the difference. So with reappraisal, you're actually reframing this situation,
Right.
finding a new way to look at it. Which in this case means those surprised faces become less threat alert and more open to a positive interpretation.
Exactly. And the researchers wanted to be extra pran.
Yeah.
Sure, this wasn't just a fluke with faces.
Okay.
So they ran a second study.
Wait, before we get to study 2, I have a question.
Okay.
They trained people to use reappraisal on negative images,
Right.
but then the valence bias task was all about faces.
Uh-huh.
So is this what they call implicit reappraisal?
Yeah.
Like, were people's brains automatically applying the reappraisal skill to the surprised faces without even realizing it?
That's a great observation, and you're spot on. The study trained explicit reappraisal, but the shift in the valence bias task likely reflects implicit reappraisal happening behind the scenes.
Okay.
Think about it. We're regulating our emotions implicitly all the time without even being aware of it.
That's incredible. So we all have this hidden ability to reappraise on the fly.
Yeah.
And this valence bias task might be a new way to measure this.
It's a really promising avenue for research. Being able to measure implicit reappraisal could give us a whole new understanding of how we regulate emotions in everyday life.
Okay, my brain is already buzzing with possibilities.
Ah.
Now let's hear about study 2.
Okay.
What did they change up?
Instead of faces, they used ambiguous scenes this time.
Okay.
Pictures that could be interpreted as positive or negative, depending on your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like those optical illusions, where you can see two different images.
Ooh, I love those. So they swapped faces for scenes.
No.
But did they keep the same reappraisal training?
Yep, everything else stayed the same.
Okay.
One session to establish baseline valence bias, then a week later training in reappraisal, followed by the valence bias task again this time with the ambiguous scenes.
And did it work? Could people actually shift their bias for these ambiguous scenes?
The results mirrored the first study perfectly.
Oh, wow.
Reappraisal led to more positive evaluations of the ambiguous scenes, while the responses to clearly positive or negative scenes stayed the same.
That's amazing. So it really does seem like reappraisal can train our brains to find the positive in ambiguity.
Right.
And this works across different types of stimuli. I can already see how this could be so useful in daily life.
Absolutely. Think about how often we encounter ambiguous situations. A delayed flight, a sudden change of plans, an unexpected email from your boss.
Yeah.
If you tend to jump to the negative,
Yeah.
those situations can really spike your stress.
You know, I've always struggled with that. Catastrophizing, my therapist calls it. My mind instantly goes to the worst case scenario.
And this research suggests that reappraisal could be a powerful tool to challenge those automatic negative thoughts.
Okay.
Instead of letting your mind spiral, you can pause and say, okay, what's another way to look at this? What are some potential positive outcomes?
I love that. So instead of getting swept away by that initial, oh feeling,
Yeah.
you can use reappraisal to create a sense of possibility even when things are uncertain. But I have to ask, are there ever times when reappraisal might not be helpful?
Hmm.
What if it makes us overly optimistic and we miss genuine red flags or risks?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
I guess like any tool you have to use it wisely.
Right.
Reappraisal isn't about ignoring potential problems or wearing rose-colored glasses.
Right.
It's about having a realistic and balanced perspective, acknowledging the negative, but also actively searching for the potential positive aspects of a situation.
So you're not trying to paint a happy face on everything.
Right.
But you're also not letting the negative thoughts run wild.
Exactly.
It's about finding that middle ground.
It's precisely. And like we've been saying, it's about having that flexibility to choose where you focus your attention depending on what the situation calls for.
Flexibility seems to be a recurring theme in all of this.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, wouldn't this be an incredible skill to teach kids? I mean, they face so much uncertainty as they grow up.
You're absolutely right. Imagine if we equipped kids with these reappraisal skills early on. They'd be better able to handle stress, navigate challenges, and bounce back from setbacks.
It's almost like giving them a superpower to deal with the ups and downs of life.
I love that analogy. And the great thing is, reappraisal is a skill anyone can learn and develop.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has definitely given me a new perspective on ambiguity.
Good.
I used to see it as something to be feared and avoided, but now I'm starting to see it as an opportunity for growth, for learning, for maybe even a little bit of excitement.
That's the spirit. And remember, if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by negativity or uncertainty, just take a deep breath and remember the power of reappraisal.
Okay.
Challenge those initial assumptions. Look for alternative interpretations. And who knows? You might even start to enjoy the ride.
That's what I'm hoping for. This has been the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember to think again.